Welcome to date number 2.
Welcome
You've made
back.
it this far.
Yep.
Your marriage has never looked brighter. So we're talking about trust, and we've entitled date number 2 Trust Factor.
Yes.
Because in any kind of relationship, if you don't have trust, the truth is you don't have anything at all.
Yep, it's true. So we are diving into fun content today that I think really helped Joel and I understand how to have a deeper level of trust in our relationship, in our marriage, and really helped us navigate, I think more than anything, navigate conflict. And just process information better in our marriage, which is super important. And it's kind of like when we talk about trust, it's kind of like when you are first married, you have what we like to call predictive trust, or what some people call predictive trust. This is behavior-based trust.
Yeah.
So for example, when you consistently show up on time, I can predict your behavior is that you're going to be on time because your behavior has shown me predictively that you're going to be on time, right? Or the opposite is true. You show up late all the time. I have predictive lack of trust that you're going to be on time. And so it's kind of a surface level trust to your relationship that you build early on in your relationship. A trust that's solely based on behavior. So as you get to know each other, as you're maybe a year or two into marriage, your trust is based off of the behaviors that you see inside of one another. But there's actually a deeper level of trust that you can build inside of your relationship that we've experienced will take you to new levels in your marriage and really help you work through communication and conflict in a way better way.
Yeah, predictive trust is kind of like the on-ramp to trust.
Yes, that's a great way
But
to
there's
describe
a deeper level that healthy marriages have to have, and not only healthy marriages, but if you want your marriage to synergize,
that's
to
a great way to
be
describe
the marriage that you dreamed of, you have to move to a further level of trust, and it's called vulnerability-based trust.
That sounds very scary.
I know, it's
but it's
frightening.
not as scary as it sounds. I promise.
Well, here's the scary part about it, is that you have to be able to show your weaknesses and admit your mistakes. So that's a different level of trust.
Yeah.
It's creating an atmosphere in your marriage where there's no fear of repercussion for being vulnerable.
Yeah.
For saying, okay, I'm not really good at that. You're much better at that. And so why don't you do that? And I can do this where I'm strong at, and the whole team can win.
Yeah, and I think we talked about this last week, which I love. You have to see marriage. It's not selfish. It's not about me. It's not about Joel. It's about the team winning.
Absolutely.
And so when you see it about the team winning, you can approach this very differently. And I love the concept of understanding, oftentimes when we think about the way that our spouse is wired, we want to make them in our own image, right?
That's true.
Like oftentimes
especially in the beginning of our marriage, where it would be like, you don't see this? How come you don't understand this? This is the way it's supposed to be.
Yeah, and we say early on in our marriage, but that sometimes is like, how can you not see this?
It's true.
But it helps understand that our spouses are not wired the way we're wired. We are wired differently. And I think oftentimes early on in our marriage, we would hit conflict, or not even conflict, but just barriers in our communication because I didn't see the world the way that Joel did. I didn't process information the way he did, and vice versa. The truth is, we're just wired differently. And so we are going to dive into, last week we had you take your Myers-Briggs personality test, your 16personalities.com. And what we're going to unpack is core differences in personalities that when you understand the strength and the weakness of the way you're wired, you can learn to complement one another and not necessarily make allowances for that weakness, but understand that they're wired differently. They don't process information the same way that you do. And instead of utilizing that as a weakness in your relationship and in your marriage, you can actually use it as an incredible strength to function stronger as a team in your marriage. So
and
let's dive in.
Yeah, that's where the synergy begins to happen. So if you haven't gone to 16personalities.com and taken the test, you can just pause this video now. Go take the quick test. You can do it on your smartphone or on your computer.
It's fun. Like, don't let the test stress you out. Some people are so weird about personality tests, and I get it. You feel like it's going to like put you in a box, but don't feel that way. Take the test. It's a lot of fun.
It's a lot of fun to learn about yourself.
Yes.
So let's dive into the first characteristic of the Myers-Briggs personality test, and it's I and E, or E and I, extrovert and introvert. And an extrovert primarily focuses and is concerned with the external world around them. So all of you extroverts out there, you social butterflies, you're concerned with what's happening on the external world, where the introvert is more focused and concerned with the internal world, those deep stoic thinkers out there.
Yeah, so extroverts are oftentimes fueled by being around people. And that doesn't mean that you don't refresh by being alone, but people energize you. Yeah. They give you energy. I'm an extrovert. Joel is kind of a little bit of both, I feel like.
I'm an extrovert, but I'm closer to the introvert line. And again, like, none of us are 100%. Yeah. We're all fall somewhere in the spectrum between the two.
Yeah, absolutely. And oftentimes extroverts, we think as we speak. We process out loud, which can get us in a lot of trouble in every relationship that we have. But oftentimes extroverts are verbal processors. And introverts are internal processors. Yes. They think first and they speak later. And oftentimes extroverts, they express themselves very well verbally. And introverts express themselves very well in written form. And so you can see how you've got an extrovert fueled by being around people, an introvert fueled by being alone. An extrovert who expresses themselves very well verbally, sometimes we can have diarrhea of the mouth. Like, literally everything I process out loud all the time. In the shower, in the car, like, if I think it, I speak it oftentimes. And introverts, they need time to process that information. They're internal processors, and they process things better in written form. Now, where that can be huge when it comes to your marriage is you take in and process information differently, right? And so sometimes, like me, I want to talk about it right away. Like, if I feel a shift in our energy,
true. She's gonna talk about it right away in that place. And I am listening to that, and I'm thinking to myself...
He's being a good listener, because introverts are oftentimes...
I'm thinking to myself, okay, I don't want to respond in a wrong way here. I want to make sure every word that's going to come out of my mouth is going to be the right word. And
I don't think that at all.
Some of you spouses totally get what I'm saying. Like, you don't want to end up saying something that you're going to regret later.
Yeah. And a lesson that I've learned in our marriage, and also in my working relationships with people, I had a really good friend of mine was highly introverted, more so than Joel. And I would feel a shift in our working relationship, or something would happen at work where there was maybe miscommunication or just a bump in the road or conflict. And I would overwhelm her with my verbal processing. And I would want to fix it. I want to know what I did wrong. What can we do better? So I would just talk. And I could feel her just walls going up.
Some of the eyes out there totally know what she's saying, right?
I overwhelm you. I understand. And so what I had to learn about her was I had to give her space to process and think. And oftentimes I learned the cues, but she would always circle back around with me a day or two later and say, hey, I've thought about this situation and I'm ready to talk about it, or I'm ready to process it out. And that was really powerful for me to learn. Don't be overwhelming, and give them the space that they need to process that information. Now, where extroverts have to work on this is extroverts, you've got to give introverts space and time. Yeah. Don't overwhelm them with your verbal processing. Yeah. Introverts, you got to let extroverts process. But for introverts, when you've processed that information, you have to circle back around and have that conversation, or you're not going to grow. Because I think sometimes introverts will just bottle it up and they don't want to talk about it. And that never brings closure.
Yeah. If you're an I out there and you're ever in a big social gathering, it can be just wilting. And so if those of you who are E's out there, don't just think your spouse is shy if they're an extrovert.
Yeah.
Sometimes it just takes all the internal emotional energy to be at a party or a big event or something like that. And oftentimes I's will try to seek each other out in a party and like go and sit and chat and be like, okay, let's just relieve ourselves from all these social butterflies. But it's just different. It's just a difference of how we're also energized. So E's out there that have beautiful eyes, help, and if they engage for a little bit, just know that they are doing
celebrate them.
The very best job ever.
Yeah, they're doing great.
So our next personality letter that signifies it, the two things that it signifies is sensing versus intuition. Now, sensing, they move and often present and take in information in a sequential order, and it's also step by step, where your intuition, or the N, it takes in and shares information in like a big picture or a snapshot kind of a way.
Yeah, absolutely. So for S's, for sensing, I'm an S, Joel is an N, he's intuition. So sensing, we love facts and details. They're very important. And we oftentimes process information A to B, B to C, C to D, until we get to the big picture. So we process information and ideas in details.
Yeah, N's, we would go not A to B, B to C. We would go A, B, Y, Z. We're the arc. We're the big picture snapshot of let's do this. Yeah. And here's what it's going to do for people. And here's how we're going to help the world.
Yeah, N's think very much in big picture. They're interested in doing new and different, exciting things. They oftentimes move on to the next vision quickly, while S's are still working like, wait, I'm at C or I'm at D, like I haven't gotten to D or Z yet. And so it's interesting to see, like, when you process these two personalities and they come together, how it can make for a very interesting...
Yeah, let me give you an example, quick one. When we first got married, I would like float out these big dreams, and Casey would be thinking in her mind, well, if we're going to be doing that, we're going to have to do these are all the work we're going to have to do, all the logistics, and she would begin to get stressed out. I interpreted that as she doesn't really care for my dreams. Like, she is riddling my dreams with reality. Yeah. And so one time when I was still in law school, we were almost finishing, we had just written a book, we had our first child, and I got this letter from Harvard Divinity School. Now, this is something that I'm like, well, I at least need to check out this option. Geez. I need to. So we went out, we spent some time in Cambridge.
I did good in the moment, though. I wasn't like, you are crazy, but that's what I was thinking in my mind. But I didn't say it. Thank you
for being so kind. But then we began to think about, the logistics of like, okay, how are we going to move to Cambridge with our new child?
Now, I thought about that the day he got the letter in the mail and said he was interested. I was like, I knew all the facts and details of what this would mean.
But I needed to explore it out. And here's where the strength kind of came out. I didn't end up going to Harvard Divinity yet. No, I didn't end up going. I didn't end up going. But part of it was she helped me to say, okay, well, if we're going to actually do that, are we ready for this, these sacrifices and these, opportunities? And is this the time in the season of our life?
Yeah, realistically, what does this look like? And I think that was a really important lesson that Joel and I had to learn through this process of the way we process information differently. Because he would see it in a big picture, and I would see it in details. And so we had to learn. I had to not overwhelm him right away when he had a big idea or a dream that he wanted to do. I couldn't overwhelm him with all the details. I had to hold back, let it land on him, let him kind of process it out. And Joel had to learn to say to me,
so true.
Hey, I'm not saying this is what I want to do.
I have to preface it. I have to say,
Yes.
okay, I'm not saying this is just a vision or a dream that would be a great opportunity or potential.
Yeah.
And I have to preface it. It helps when I preface it.
And he also had to sit on things and pray about them before he shared them with me. Sorry, our dog is in here.
We quarantine.
We are. He's scratching at the door.
Now let's talk about thinker versus feeler. T versus F. A thinker makes decisions by stepping back and taking an objective view and making an objective decision. Feelers, when they're going to make a decision, they step in to the picture and put themselves in the other person's shoes, and they empathize.
Yes, majorly empathize. I'm super high on the feeler side of things.
You truly are.
And Joel, I think, is kind of middle of the road, thinker, feeler. Oftentimes thinkers, they analyze the pros and cons, and they're very consistent and logical. They make decisions with their head and oftentimes want to be fair. They care
Which is
about
a good attribute.
It's a great attribute. I mean, it's a great attribute. Truth telling is more important than being tactful, as opposed to feelers, who it would be the opposite. Being tactful is more important than telling the cold truth.
Yeah.
And they oftentimes, like for feelers, they empathize. Like they put themselves in people's shoes and care very much about how information is going to land on someone.
It's true. Remember that one college roommate who was more on the thinking side?
Yes.
And you were on the feeling side?
Yes, and I'm so high on the feeling side. I would make up stories about people. Like we would be leaving our apartment in college, and I would see a dad taking his daughter to throw out the trash before he took her to school, and I would be like, oh, I wonder if he's a single dad. I wonder what happened. And she would be like, you are a weirdo, Casey. You don't even know those people.
So
but
funny.
I just empathize. I always wonder about people's lives and put myself in their shoes. And
every person and individual is important.
Yes.
It's not just hey, one size fits all.
Never.
It's what is your situation
Never.
and how can I best help craft this for this individual?
Yes, absolutely. And that can be really interesting when you think about how you communicate together in your marriage, whether you're both feelers, you're both thinkers, or one is a thinker, one is a feeler.
Yeah, and the people that I coach, my marriage coaching clients, this is the biggest kind of rough spot.
Yes.
Where you have a feeler who oftentimes expresses what they're feeling, and they want that closeness by the feeling and not just being objective.
Yeah.
Or but they want to express themselves in that all or nothing way.
Yeah.
And so sometimes they'll say, you always do this.
Yeah.
This is their big rough spot.
But that's
always,
how they feel.
We always do this, but the thinker's hey, I'm not, that is not true. I am not owning anything that isn't true for me. And so the thinker often comes off harsh and not empathetic at all. And the feeler often comes off to the thinker who's thinking, that is totally irrational. I don't even understand what you're saying. But the cool thing is when you do have a thinker and you have a feeler, man, your family is so set up to be balanced.
Yes,
especially
absolutely.
when it comes to our daughter. And this has kind of been in the morning time, I usually take a thinker approach with our kids.
And Lincoln is a thinker.
And I'm
he's
Lincoln,
very logical,
it's time to
very
get
fair.
up. You're going to be late for school. But with my daughter, who's more of a feeler, it's a totally different scenario.
Yes. You have to be, you always with her have to think through how it's going to land on her. And you can just cold hard truth to Lincoln. Get up, it's time to go to school. He's up, downstairs, time to go to school. But with Reagan, you have to take a different approach. Information lands on her very differently. Yeah. And so Joel would come in, Reagan, it's time to get up, get downstairs, eat your breakfast. Yeah. And mornings would end in meltdowns and fits, and
I'm working on my parenting all the time,
especially with her. But I had to tell him, if you come in and you rub her back and you rub her feet and you slowly wake her up and then let her know that her dogs are waiting for her at the bottom of the stairs, it's something that she looks forward to.
So you know what I do now? You know what I do now? I rub her back. I rub her feet, and I tell her that her dogs are waiting for her downstairs. And it's a much better morning.
Much better experience.
Because I'm learning to think and to feel and to empathize and to put myself and to speak her language. And this beautiful relationship can blossom when you understand that.
Yeah.
Now we're going to move to our last personality types. It's judging versus perceiving.
Yeah.
Now, judging, they like to use a planned approach to meeting a deadline in a scheduled way. And the perceiver likes to use a spontaneous approach to meeting a deadline with a flurry of energy and movement leading right up to that deadline.
Yeah. Oftentimes, J's, like if you think about a project that you're given for 30 days to plan it, right? You have 30 days to complete the project.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, J's will find their inspiration, their motivation, their organization in the beginning half of that 30-day deadline.
True.
Day 1 to 15, or maybe day 5 to day 20, whatever it is. Earlier on, you'll find your energy. They're planners. They love information in an orderly fashion. But P's find their motivation, their energy, their inspiration as the deadline approaches.
Yes.
Oftentimes, P's are really good under pressure. And I think this can oftentimes be one of the biggest personality conflicts. Because judgers can judge a P. You're a procrastinator, they judge them because they're so last minute.
Like, this is called being an adult.
Yes.
You need to get your stuff together.
Yes.
And get on board. But can I just say this? Our temptation as we look at J's, we think to ourselves, stop nagging.
Yeah.
We say
stop
to ourselves,
controlling.
Yeah, stop controlling and
excuse me.
And stop being so rigid and start living.
Yeah.
Like, let's be in the moment. Let's take life as it comes a little bit.
Yeah.
And so you've got these two different sides to it, and you can either look at it as a weakness, like you need to get your stuff together, or you need to stop controlling, or you can look at it and say, how does this become an asset for our family?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think some of the ways we've had to learn to navigate that is I am very much a planner. And so I have to learn to leave room for spontaneity. Everything cannot be controlled, and that is okay. So I will plan as much as possible, and then we're going to leave just about 20% for be spontaneous. Things are not going to go the way that you planned, and that's going to be okay. And I have to learn to be okay with that. That's something I've had to learn over the years. Not be so rigid, be spontaneous, have fun, relax a little bit.
And I, on the other hand, have had to say, okay, I know that my wife, she is a planner. Yeah. And so how can I get the information out to her as soon as possible instead of leaving it in my mind? Another trait of a P is that we love to have our options open to the very last minute. We don't want to commit exactly. We want to see which of these are going to be the best opportunity at the time. So if I'm going to work together and synergize with Casey, I've got to start bringing those things as soon as I can.
Even if it's just an idea that he doesn't know is going to, hey, I don't know if I'm going to be out of town on this weekend, but it's a possibility.
Yeah, and so we have to, there's a third way. It's not her way, it's not my way. It's coming together. It's that old Genesis chapter 2 where God invents marriage. He says, to paraphrase, the son's going to leave mom and dad. They're going to leave and cleave, to their wife. So there's this, and the two will become one, bone of bone, flesh of flesh, all of that. So it's not Casey's way. It's not my way. It's a third way. It's a synergistic way of taking the best of our strengths and helping to cover our weaknesses. Yeah,
I learned this. And the other thing that's important to know about a P is they're really good under pressure. And I learned a really big lesson in this when I had planned out everything. I had spreadsheets, I had role descriptions, I had diagrams, color-coded diagrams. Yeah. And oftentimes when it doesn't go according to plan, I don't think as quick on my feet. Like, I'm still stuck in the fact that my plan didn't work or something happened that messed up my plan. That's when P's are fantastic because they can jump in. They're great under pressure. They think very quick on their feet, and they can come in and just reformat the pieces of your plan very well together. So that's a great way that you can utilize an S and a P together. And another thing that's good is false deadlines. Like giving them false deadlines. They may not know. I guess that doesn't mean like technically lying.
Well, just to give you an example, like I've always worked for P's, and I am a P.
Yeah.
So I remember
I've always worked for P's too.
So when I work for P's, I know this weakness about me, and this is vulnerability-based trust. You have to admit your weakness. I know this weakness about me, so I would tell my boss, who is a P, hey, the deadline is 5 days before the deadline. I wouldn't actually tell him that part, but I would say, oh, it's due 5 days before the end of the month. And so what would happen on the last day at about 10 p.m., my boss would give me the first half and say, here, I'll have the rest to you later tonight. And it would be fine because we still had 5 more days cushion to work all of the details out. So help a P out and give him a false deadline.
Yeah. So we've kind of unpacked a lot of information when it comes to personality test. And again, as we understood more and more, and you can read on it at 16personalities.com, you can dive more into the different personalities, but you can see how no longer are you trying to make your spouse think or process information like you. You understand that's the way God designed them to be. He gave them that specific personality. He gave me the specific personality that I have. Now, that's not to say that we don't need to work on our weaknesses, but you can see how understanding those things about your spouse can really help you in communication and conflict.
It's the natural way that we normally think. So if you're a feeler and you're empathetic, it doesn't mean that you can't learn to think logically.
Absolutely.
It just means that these are the way that you naturally go about your life. These are the way that is your normal wiring, and it's your areas of strength. And so use your strengths and not your weaknesses. In marriage, the temptation is to focus on the differences as weaknesses and the liabilities and saying, why can't you be more like me? But love isn't about making someone in your own image. Love is about living for another person's benefit and knowing who they are and being strong where they're weak and working together as a team so that your team, your marriage can thrive and prosper. We pray that this vulnerability lesson, this vulnerability-based trust would happen in your marriage. And that's what Myers-Briggs does. It says, okay, everyone has strengths, everyone has weaknesses. You are psychologically
no one personality
wired
is better than
this
the other.
way. So acknowledge your weaknesses and be vulnerable and work together, and your marriage is about to synergize and go to a whole new level.
Yes, and something that's really fun as you in this video is to dive in and discover more about your personality type and your spouse's personality type. And then talk about your differences. Talk about the different ways that you're wired and try to help one another understand that a little bit better.
So we have an activity for you, a few questions to start you down that road of the discussion of Myers-Briggs and your personality. So check out those questions. And next week, date number 3, we're going to be talking about fight night heroes. How to take your conflict and reduce the time of your conflict. And what we discovered in these little tools that we have is that you can reduce that conflict time by about 90%. So we're excited to share those.
He's excited about that.
Yes. Well, yes.
Just how to better navigate through conflict, really, and communicate better when you're in the heat of an argument.
So we'll see you next date night. God bless. Until next time.
See you next week. Bye.